Why did you leave the Temptations?
Why did I leave the Temptation? Because in every man's life, there comes a time when he has to step out and take forth his own destiny. Physically labor, I have built MOTOWN with my hands. Yeah. Well, all the headlines said I was fired, you know. But I don't see how you could fire someone out of a group of that magnitude. There will come a day that I will tell the whole story.
He was slowly returning to form, the spark that once defined him.
Somewhere there should be for all the world to see a statue of a fool made of stone.
After a troubled solo career, post-Temptations marked by drug addiction and battles with the IRS.
Case number 88.
But this is Detroit's most recent memory of David Ruffin, in court, facing cocaine charges, defended as a broken drug addict so out of control that court orders, friends, not even the threat of jail could keep him in a drug treatment program. Alcohol and all types of drugs were just a part of the David Ruffin lifestyle.
Life seemed to have thrown him a lifeline.
Who let love slip through his hand.
At 50, he believed he still had more to give, more music, more fire, and definitely more fight.
Comeback record? I got one. I told you I got about 4 of them. They'll be out pretty soon. You will hear them. Or I have some tunes that I've written, some tunes I've been had for years. Some tunes I'm finally are finishing up now. Or that I have no doubt are hit records that someone is really going to pay attention to them. I have no doubt about that. And it will be pretty soon. And like I said, thank you very much, and God bless.
And even those close to him took notice.
He told me, he ran up to me, he said, feel my throat, feel my throat. I said, feel your throat for what? He says, feel my throat, feel my throat. And so he grabbed my hand and he put my hand right up under his neck here. And I said, man, it's hard. I said, what's wrong with your throat? He said, it's in great shape. And that night, I heard David Ruffin perform. I mean, it was amazing. Some of the things that boy could do with his voice.
In 1991, alongside fellow Temptations Eddie Kendricks and Dennis Edwards, he embarked on a month-long tour in England, a tour that would end in mid-May.
And she's gone away with her with my future. My life is filled with so much gloom.
The tour turned out to be a success, so successful that lost opportunities and once closed doors were now beginning to slowly open.
We did such a successful tour. People were calling. They want us to go back at double the money. They want to pay each one of us $100,000 a piece. We were out getting recording offers. Now, of course, one of the stipulations was to keep David clean, you know, and he was for a while.
Things were finally looking up, or so we thought.
After collecting his money, David returned to Philadelphia.
During that week, he called me and I said, David, where you at? He said, man, I'm over here and I'm having fun. And I said, man, we need you to sign this contract so we can get $150,000 dance. So I'm thinking this will make him sober up for me. I said, David, I love you, and please just get out of that. This little guy named Butch Edwards was his little right-hand man, and he called me one morning about 4 a.m. He said, David OD. And I said, what? He said, well, I took him to the hospital.
At 3:55 a.m. on June 1st, 1991, just 2 weeks after the tour, David Ruffin, the voice that turned My Girl into a cultural anthem, the voice behind the Temptations' biggest hits, the voice that helped define Motown's golden era, was no more.
In Philadelphia, police say former Temptation singer David Ruffin apparently visited a crack house in the hours before he died. Philadelphia police are searching for a friend of Ruffin's who drove him in a limo to the crack house and later dropped him off at a hospital shortly before he died Saturday morning. Police say a large sum of money in traveler's checks was missing from David Ruffin, though it's not clear if they were stolen or not. A Philadelphia TV station quoted a police source as saying that Ruffin had $30,000 with him when he went into a crack house.
Whether it was truly accidental or his drugs had been tampered with, the conspiracies surrounding his death from fans, close friends, and family pointed toward foul play, especially considering the fact that his money belt was missing.
I just want to tell the world that my daddy was clean. Somebody set him up for that money, and somebody took his life.
Was it an accidental overdose, a robbery, or something darker?
My father didn't die in a crack house.
And he said, if y'all do another autopsy, one of y'all gonna be laying right next to him. And we never did the second autopsy.
For over 3 decades, many have tried to crack the puzzle to no avail. But now, all that is about to change.
So he went back out and briefcase. I said, you look at it? Yeah, ain't nothing in it.
From the coroner's report to dispelling the myths.
With a briefcase full of money. No one is exactly sure what happened. Almost a week went by before the John Doe in the morgue was identified as David Ruffin.
To close confidant statements.
My daddy had been clean for a couple of months, right? And he was so excited.
To tracking his last movements.
So he was laying there as a John Doe. When they found out where the crack house was, they went there, it was a nursing home.
To shocking revelations at his funeral.
David called me one day in Chicago. It's the first and the last time that I ever talked with this, your husband, your father, your brother, your father-in-law. And I'd like to share the conversation.
These are the findings that point to the true cause of death of the tortured soul of David Ruffin. Known for his rough, hair-raising tenor vocals, David Ruffin was one of a kind.
He was a wonderful, talented young man.
David Ruffin was a producer's dream, a producer and songwriter's dream. You could give David a lyric sheet and play the track, and he would lay a track that you couldn't come up with as a songwriter.
With his slick style, sharp moves, and dramatic knee drops, this brother was as cold as ice.
David was practicing then how to throw the microphone up in the air, turn around, drop to his knees, and grab it as the microphone would come down.
David had that rough baritone tenor voice, you know.
He always sang with undeniable passion and conviction and knew exactly how to captivate any crowd. But behind this spotlight lay a tortured soul. A soul that was always running from its demons, demons that went way, way back. Born on January 18, 1941 in Wynot, Mississippi, Davis Eli Ruffin came into the world already burdened with hardship. Raised in deep poverty without electricity or running water, tragedy struck early. His mother, Ophelia, died of heart complications when he was just 10 months old, a loss that would shape his life.
His mother actually died about, I'd say, 10 months, according to what he told me, after his childbirth.
As a child, he was sickly, afflicted with both rheumatic fever and asthma. His father, Eli, on the other hand, was a strict minister and truck driver who enforced discipline with an iron fist, firmly believing in not sparing the rod.
But his older brother, Quincy, talked about how his father, Eli, who was a preacher, I guess, used to beat the boys with a bullwhip.
Under Eli's authoritarian leadership, the Ruffin family toured the South, opening for acts like the Five Blind Boys of Mississippi and the legendary Mahalia Jackson.
I grew up listening to spiritual. It was my brother Jimmy and Rita Mae and my father. We always known as the Ruffin family. And we used to open up shows for like the Soul Stirrers, Mahalia Jackson, Clara Ward singers. He was the opening act in Meridian, Mississippi.
Though Davis and his older brother Jimmy always tagged along, their father featured them only occasionally due to the significant age gap between them and the rest of the group, believing they weren't mature enough to be taken seriously. For 8 long years, the two brothers worked hard to prove their worth, but the old man remained unmoved, a tough nut to crack. Could the father's coldness toward the children, especially the poor young Ruffin, whom he might have seen as the cause, have been rooted in the grief of losing the woman he loved, their mother, and in emotions he simply didn't know how to express? Or was there more to it? Anyway, with an already painful childhood, compounded by an emotionally barren father whose approval he'd never earn, and with Mississippi offering few prospects, a young and impatient Ruffin began searching for a way out. The nearby city of Memphis was flourishing, and many people were migrating there. So, in 1955, at just 14, Ruffin decided to drop out of school and move to Memphis. There, he began taking gigs touring with various gospel groups, often singing background vocals.
A group called the Dixie Nightingales out of Memphis, Tennessee, singing spiritual. And we was on, at that time, I was touring with the Womack brothers, Bobby Womack, and Mavis Staple, the Dixie Hummingbirds, Swan Silvertones.
Being on the road as such a young, inexperienced kid spelled doom. He soon found himself prowling the city's red light district, sleeping in brothels and on the streets. At around 15, he finally caught his first major big break when one of his Memphis mentors, jazz musician Phineas Newborn Sr., gave him his first major opportunity, bringing him along as a background singer to Hot Springs, Arkansas, where they performed at the 50 Grand Ballroom and Casino.
After that, I went to Hot Springs, Arkansas with Phineas Newman Sr. He was a great jazz player. And I played at the 50 Grand Ballroom Casino. I worked there for a month.
Tragedy struck again when the gig ended, forcing Ruffin to work as a stable boy at a jockey club, exercising horses in the mornings before the races. It was there that he met a murky figure known as Father Eddie Bush, who, according to Tony Turner's Deliver Us from Temptation, was a traveling minister who doubled as a pimp, a man known to move in less than godly circles. Eddie Bush took him under his wing and introduced him to a whole new life. Ruffin chauffeured for him, sang in bars along the way, being exposed to an experience he would spend the rest of his life chasing. In 1957, old man Eli Ruffin suddenly died of a heart attack. Ruffin did not attend the funeral. Sensing an opportunity, Eddie Bush saw this as the moment to take things to the next level. With Ruffin now living in his home, booking gigs for him, and making plans to re-enroll him in school, Bush filed adoption papers. Davis Eli Ruffin became Little David Bush. To David, everything he had ever craved from his father, direction, protection, love, and someone to nurture his talent, seemed to be manifested in Eddie Bush. Little did he know, no matter how far he ran, no matter how badly he wanted to erase his past, he couldn't escape himself. He was just running from his shadow. Amidst all this, it became clear that they weren't selling enough ads for their paper to afford to keep David on the road. So, they headed to Detroit, the new land of milk and honey.
From Michigan's MOTOWN, a new export was added to cars, the Detroit sound.
After arriving in Detroit, Eddie Bush persuaded the Small Vega label to record 2 songs by his protege. The tracks, You and I and Believe Me, were released in early 1958 under the name Little David Bush. To this day, there's debate over whether it was David Ruffin or Eddie himself singing lead. With no immediate prospects, Bush introduced David to Gwen Gordy, co-founder of Anna Records.
Love David very much. A friend of his named Eddie, I don't remember his last name at this particular time, but he brought David to me. At the time I had Anna Records. And he said that, hey, I brought this boy from Mississippi. He says, but I don't have any place to keep him, and I don't know exactly what to do with him. He says, but I brought him to you. He said, because I heard a lot of nice things about you. He says, I met you a time or two. He says, you probably don't remember me. He says, but, you know, I want you to hear him. So he says, but the only thing about it, he says, I don't have a place for him to live. So I said, well, okay, we'll hear him. So, of course, I heard David, and I thought he was really a superstar. And he really was, I mean, he's so energetic. He was young, and he really wanted to be in the entertainment business. And he seemed like a very nice person.
There, David packed records alongside Marvin Gaye and worked as an apprentice. He also joined the Voice Masters, a doo-wop group where he sang and played drums, eventually recording with them. It was here that he met future temptation, Melvin Franklin.
Me and Marvin used to pack records for Anna Records. My first record was on Vega Records with Tommy Smalls, used to be a disc jockey in New York, and Willie Stork, and on the Stork Club in New York. And I was 16 then. That's when I used to have to walk Melvin Franklin home.
While living with the Gordy family, David helped Pops Gordy with construction on the house that would become Hitsville, USA, the home of what would soon be known as MOTOWN Records.
And I used to work for Pop Gordy, Barry's father, and physically labor, I have built MOTOWN with my hands. Yeah. His father was a contractor, and I lived with him and his mother.
By 1963, the Temptations were gaining momentum. After the dismissal of the difficult Elbridge Bryant, David was brought in by Otis Williams after impressing in an audition that also included his brother Jimmy.
That had to be like 63. And that's when we had to let Al go. Now, David Ruffin had been hanging with us. And we were so popular that he said, man, I want to sing with you guys. I said, you want to sing with us? He said, man, you know, you guys are something else. And I can believe that because David was a noted singer even then, you know, and he, I mean, the fancy footwork, throwing the microphone up, dropping to his knees and swooping up. And I said, man, if you join us with already what we were doing, we would be something else. He said, well, I would like to sing, you know, with you guys. And they auditioned. I wouldn't say audition, but anyway, Jimmy Ruffin and David was in my kitchen. We were talking about it, and Jimmy said he would like to sing with us too. But I said, but Jimmy, you got bad feet. You know, you can't do all that dancing, because we call him Cush feet, because when he would walk, you know, it was like this here.
Though he started in the background, his talent soon caught Smokey Robinson's attention, who at the time produced and co-wrote their songs.
David was singing under the boardwalk. And each one of us did our bit, and after the show, Smokey came backstage and he said, man, you guys are fantastic and marvelous, I love you. You know, and then he looked at David and he said, I think I have a song for you. So David said, hey man, bring it on, we'll sing anything.
David especially, David had that voice that, I figured once people heard that sound, you know, and he had that rough baritone tenor voice, you know, and I figured if I can get him to sing something sweet, the girls would love it.
With the hit song, My Girl, a song that would become the group's signature song and has since garnered over 1 billion streams to date, Ruffin moved to the front. He went on to lead over 10 hits, including 1967's I Wish It Would Rain, released just days before its heartbroken writer Roger Penzabene took his own life at just 22.
All of them, Wish It Would Rain, it tells a story. There's a message there. Roger Penzabene wrote that song, and during the '67 Christmas, he's supposed to join us at the Land Casino, and 2 days before New Year's, he took his life with a shotgun in front of his head, which was a very true song.
Sunshine, blue skies, please go away. God has found another, and she's gone away.
Ruffin's tenure with the Temptations was defined by his passionate, soulful, and dramatic performances, which quickly won over fans and critics alike. Offstage, he also contributed to the group's dynamic by introducing the innovative four-headed microphone stand. This allowed all 5 members to sing and perform choreography seamlessly without crowding around a single mic, a signature move in their live shows. However, by 1967, the trappings of fame began to take their toll. The once humble and hard-working young man was now a different individual.
What kind of guy was David Ruffin?
Well, David, in those days, I knew David. He was quiet-spoken and, just a nice person and very talented always.
His ego had swelled, and he had begun to see himself as the true star of the group. His behavior became increasingly erratic. Now battling a cocaine addiction, he began to frequently miss rehearsals and shows, and when he was available, he refused to travel with the group in a bus and instead opted to use a custom limo, often accompanied by his then-girlfriend, singer Tammy Terrell.
I guess you heard about the limousine with the glasses. And everyone else was riding the station wagon, so I guess that wasn't too appropriate, but they could have rolled with me if they wanted to.
Their relationship was tumultuous. One infamous moment saw Ruffin propose to her, only for Tammy to find out later he was already married after excitingly announcing their engagement on stage. Ruffin's desire for personal recognition intensified after the Supremes were renamed Diana Ross and the Supremes. He began pushing for a similar change: David Ruffin and the Temptations. The rest of the group, committed to unity, strongly opposed the idea.
Well, you see, when we first started out, we made a vow that we would not change, because we had heard about Frankie Lyman leaving the Teenagers and Tony Williams leaving the Platters, so we made a vow. But it's one thing to hold true to that vow once, you start to make huge amounts of money and doors open up, and when you are a group, you have to move and think as one unit. You cannot have 5 guys going, 5 different directions, so it started to become a...
Furthermore, the Diana Ross situation was entirely different, at least according to Otis.
David Ruffin wanted it. David Ruffin and the Temptations.
Yes, he did.
He didn't get away with it, but Diana Ross did.
Yeah, well, she had Berry Gordy, and a much more different kind of sense, but we met.
Was there something going on there?
Well, I think there was a little thing going on there, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Tensions peaked when Ruffin demanded to review the group's financial records, straining his relationship with Motown head Berry Gordy, whose family had taken him in when he had nothing. Some speculate that this act, seen as betrayal, sealed his fate. In June 1968, after skipping a scheduled performance to attend another event with his new girlfriend, Barbara Gayle Martin, Ruffin was officially fired and replaced by Dennis Edwards. However, Ruffin would later refute the claims that he was fired.
But I don't see how you could fire someone out of a group of that magnitude. But there were some differences business-wise, and at that time, things just could not be smoothed out.
Though he had recommended Edwards to take his place, he began crashing Temptations concerts, grabbing the mic mid-show to steal the spotlight.
One night, I'm singing, and in comes David Ruffin. Of course I was nervous. I heard him. He came up right to the stage and started singing. That's how David was. I was singing one of his numbers. He came up and said, "Let me sing."
A potential second chance disappeared when his old habits resurfaced. In October 1968, David Ruffin filed a lawsuit against Motown Records, seeking both a release from his contract and an accounting of his finances. Motown responded with a countersuit to prevent him from leaving the label. Eventually, the case was settled out of court, with the agreement requiring Ruffin to remain under contract until its original expiration in 1975. He launched his solo career in 1969 with the release of My Whole World Ended, The Moment You Left Me, which became a top 10 hit on both the pop and R&B charts. The song's title would come to symbolize his personal struggles, a quest for fulfillment overshadowed by addiction and instability. Despite his undeniable talent, Ruffin's solo career was marred by drug abuse and a strained relationship with MOTOWN, which offered little support due to his unpredictable behavior. Legal and personal troubles followed. In 1978, he was arrested for disorderly conduct at a birthday party in Memphis. In 1982, he was fined $5,000 and sentenced to 6 months in a low-security prison for failing to pay over $310,000 in taxes from 1975 to 1977. He served 4 months and was released early for good behavior. That same year, Ruffin and Eddie Kendricks rejoined the Temptations for their reunion album and tour, featuring the R&B hit Standing on the Top with Rick James. But Ruffin's continued drug use and no-shows led to fines, and his second and final dismissal from the group by that Christmas.
Well, I think in '82 when the reunion tour did that, Eddie and I've always felt basically that the fans was a little bit cheated on that. It was too abrupt.
In 1985, Ruffin toured with Kendricks as a duo and briefly collaborated with Hall and Oates, though that partnership ended due to Ruffin's drug use. During this time, it is reported that he grew increasingly paranoid, reportedly fearing that MOTOWN wanted him dead, going so far as to contact Louis Farrakhan for help. In 1986, he pleaded no contest to a weapons charge. A year later, he was arrested for cocaine possession. Though acquitted of possession with intent to distribute, he was found guilty of drug use and sentenced to probation and community service. On January 18, 1989, Ruffin turned 48 as he and the Temptations were finally given their flowers, being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He soon afterwards began touring with Eddie Kendricks and Dennis Edwards as Ruffin, Kendricks, Edwards, former leads of the Temptations. That same year, he completed a 28-day drug rehab program in New York after multiple probation violations. In 1991, David Ruffin, along with Eddie Kendricks and Dennis Edwards, completed a successful month-long tour of England, grossing nearly $300,000. Each of the 3 former Temptations was set to receive between $50,000 and $55,000, where $5,000 was in cash, with the rest in travelers' checks. But Ruffin insisted on receiving his entire payment in cash. And so, while the others returned to the US, he remained in England. Those close to Ruffin were surprised by his behavior on the tour. He had managed to stay clean throughout the month, an impressive feat for someone long plagued by addiction. Whether this was a genuine turning point or simply a strategy to avoid giving the promoter a reason not to pay him in full remained unclear. For David Ruffin, the real temptation began once the money was in his pocket. After receiving his payment, he returned to Philadelphia, to the home of his girlfriend, where he'd been living since 1989. The tour's success had earned them a second one, scheduled to begin later that June, with each member set to make $100,000, double the previous amount. But there was one condition. Ruffin had to sign the contract. Dennis Edwards repeatedly called him, urging him to sign, but Ruffin never did.
After collecting his money, David returned to Philadelphia.
During that week, he called me and I said, "David, where you at?" He said, "Man, I'm over here and I'm having fun." And I said, "Man, we need you to sign this contract so we can get a $150,000 advance." So I'm thinking, this will make him sober up for me.
On the evening of May 31st, Ruffin hired a limousine from his longtime friend Butch. The driver, Donald Brown, picked him up, and they headed to a bar in West Philadelphia. After a night of drinking, they proceeded to a known drug house on 52nd Street near Parkside at 2 a.m. Ruffin, reportedly intoxicated, slapped down $200 for 10 vials of crack cocaine. By 2:25 a.m., the drugs were gone, and so was Ruffin. He collapsed, unresponsive. Brown rushed Ruffin to the University of Pennsylvania Hospital. Arriving around 3 a.m., he alerted security guards, telling them that Ruffin had overdosed and sped off. Hospital staff attempted to resuscitate Ruffin, but were unsuccessful. At approximately 3:55 a.m., David Ruffin was pronounced dead. Without identification, only $53 in his pocket, hospital staff labeled him John Doe and transferred his body to the city morgue. The FBI later confirmed his identity via fingerprint analysis. His death was ruled accidental, caused by an adverse reaction to cocaine and other substances. Rumors of foul play quickly emerged. Close friends and family claimed a money belt containing $40,000 in cash and travelers' checks was missing. His daughter, Nedra Ruffin, said he had called her just hours earlier, promising to buy her a car. She also alleged he had unexplained bruises on his body, injuries the authorities attributed to being dragged into the limousine. His girlfriend noted that Ruffin had left home on May 29th and never returned, suggesting he may have been staying in a hotel. The limo driver claimed he left the hospital quickly to return the limo. Thousands attended David Ruffin's funeral in Detroit, a testament to the impact of his voice and spirit. Michael Jackson offered to pay for the funeral expenses, though he did not attend.
Michael Jackson picked up the tab for his funeral. Jackson heard that the entertainer had no money, so he called the Swanson Funeral Home in Detroit to say he would pay more than $7,000 in funeral expenses. Says Michael was just a kid when Ruffin was at his peak, but he loved him.
Ruffin left behind 4 children, 3 daughters with his first wife, Sandra Barnes, and 1 son with his longtime partner, Jenna Sapia. In the end, how he died matters far less than how he made us feel. Until we meet again, brother.
David Ruffin was a giant of a man, and he was loved on every continent on this planet. And as long as his memory lives in our hearts, he will be immortal.